But the root cause of all the poor data quality reasons we have is because of data literacy. We run our business every day, but I get my reports every quarter. All data management is change management, process, data, systems, and people. This presentation is mainly on my third book, which I wrote, which is here. We'll talk about that book and how you can get it in a few minutes. But this is a book which is on data quality. So why did I write this data quality? So this picture explains very well. So most of the companies have got poor data quality issues. So they have a lot of needs and aspirations. So this is on the left side. So they say, okay, let's do this project on improving the data quality. Nice specs are written, nice requirements are collected and everything. But ultimately, when it's implemented and lastly when it is deployed, the reality is completely different. So I wrote this book so that the chances of having good quality data in the company is actually improved. So we have seen a lot of statistics from MIT, from Gartner, from McKinsey, and all these companies where they say that improve your data quality, you become a better business. MIT say that just improving the data quality will improve the company's revenue by 26%. In the retail industry, they say it's about 6% increase in the top line, so on and so forth. Plenty of research has been done on why data really matters. But many companies are struggling to get good data quality. So Gartner did a study, and they said that 80% of the data analytics projects are actually failing in the industry. McKinsey did a study, and they say that an average user spent 2 hours in a day just looking for data. Forget about what to do with the data, just searching for data. I did a similar project in 2016 in an oil company in Calgary, and we found that it was actually 27% of the time people are spending just searching for data. Forget about doing what to do with that data, that's the next discussion. But searching itself is a big issue. 3% of the data quality, 3% of the data in a company meets the data quality standards. Jim has an article from Tom Redman, who has written this article, which talks about the 3% number. Experian did this work, and Gartner once again. And lastly, when we talk about bad data or dark data, they say that 90% of the data in a company is never used for any strategic purposes. This is a study done by Carnegie Mellon and IBM. Forrester, which is a competitor for Gartner, they also did a similar study, and that number came to 73%. So imagine 3/4 of the data in a company is never used for business reasons. So with this, I have a quick question for you. What do you think is the half-life of data in a company? Half-life meaning the time it takes for the value of the data to reduce by 50%. What do you think is the time it takes for the data's value to reduce by 50%? What's the half-life of data? Of course, every company is different. Suncor is different from Walmart. The contract data is different from an invoice data. Every data is different. Every company is different. Every geography is different. But if you have to throw a number, let's take a weighted average of all the industry, of all the companies, what would that number be? 1 year. Okay. Any other number?
1 month.
1 month. 1 year, 1 month.
3 months.
3 months. Any other number?
It should be less than a day.
Less than a day. Okay. So we have 1 year, and on the other extreme, we have 1 day, which is 8 hours. Nucleus Consulting, which is one more company very similar to Gartner, they did a study, and they looked at different industry sectors, different data types, and so on, and they came up with the weighted average. And that number is actually what they said. It's about 8 hours. So 8 hours is the time it takes for the value of the data to reduce by 50%. So why did I say this number? Especially in analytics, we are talking about insights. So when I go to my clients, they say that, Prashanth, we need insights. From what is the time frame? Let's collect the data from 2012. Give me a report from 2012 to 2023. We want a report on that. And we are going to derive insights based on those data for the last 10 years. When they say that, That's a red flag for me. Businesses are changing so dynamically. If you are looking at data for the last 10 years and making decisions today, that's a huge red flag. I did a project in 2021 for a company in Washington State, not Washington DC, which is a safety company. And one of their clients is, or many of their clients are in the oil and gas sector. So the CFO said, Prashanth, don't look at any data beyond 2017. After COVID, our business model has changed. Just look at the data from 2020 onwards and derive those insights. So that's where the things are changing. So many companies are looking at data 5 years, 10 years, and making decisions for today. If they are doing that, that's a huge risk. And I'll talk about why analytics really matters, why data quality in analytics is very different from an operations perspective and a compliance perspective. It's a completely different ballgame when we talk about data quality from an analytics perspective. I'll talk about that as well. But just some food for thought on the value of data and the half-life of data as well. Yes,
what causes the data quality reduced by 50% based on the 8 hours cutoff time? Is that just because of the time, or is there any other factors that reduce the value of the data?
So there are so many factors, but most of the factors are driven by business. With the business is always in a state of flux. So you can't expect the data quality to be in a static state. There is mergers and acquisitions, divestitures, new product introductions, regulations, globalization, and all those factors are making the business go in a very dynamic way.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why the quality of the data is changing dynamically, or the value of the data changes dramatically. Like in time series data, for example, like in a refinery, you are there and you are collecting data on some safety incident, for example. If you are making a decision, taking the data which is today and making decisions 3 days later, that's practically useless. So the time series data is still lower, but overall, the discrete data versus time series data, if I were to take a weighted average, Walmart, Suncor, India, China, US, and everything, and come up with one weighted average, so that's what the number they're talking about. It's 8 hours.
No.
Yeah, every data is different. A contract data in Canada, for example, you need to keep it for 7 years. George can say more about it. But there are some data, like refinery data, for example, 7 years is practically useless. It just seconds matter there. But overall, it's the business drivers that are affecting this value of data.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So this is what I have for you. So we'll talk about data and data quality, just to bring all of us in a one common page. We'll talk about the 3 data quality myths. Some of it might be a little bit surprising. And lastly, realizing data quality. So when I did my PhD, my guide said that one of the ways to make sure that you have a good PhD is to create a report where you make the stakeholders very uncomfortable. I'm going to do that today. When you are going out of this room, you'll be very uncomfortable about some of the hypotheses, some of the beliefs you have about data quality. And you'll have a lot of things to think over and discuss as well. So that's my goal here, to make you uncomfortable. Okay, so what is data? So when we talk about data, it's actually practically a bunch of attributes in a specific format. So let's take a simple example of a purchase order. So when we talk about a purchase order, we are talking about key fields, like who is the vendor, what is the quantity, well, we are going to procure, what is the price, what is the item, so on and so forth. So each of the attributes, each of the elements in this purchase order data has got a bunch of attributes with values in a specific format. In this case, we have an attribute called quantity, which is a format is integer, and the value is 80. But on the other hand, if you look at description, which is a text, which is what it says, SKF, so on and so forth. So data is basically a bunch of attributes in a specific format. So when we say that data is bad, practically we are saying that the bunch of attributes associated with the data is actually bad. So what are the type of data we are talking about? Basically in the industry, there are 4 major types of data we are talking about. Anybody heard about this 4 types of data? Okay. So when we talk about data, give me an example of data. George, when you talk about data, what is an example of data that comes to your mind? Give me an example.
In this case, for example, work orders.
Work orders. Okay. Jim, when somebody says, give me an example of data, what is that? What will you give?
Bill of materials.
Bill of materials. Items. He says orders, he takes items. David?
Let's say maybe economic data.
Economic data. Okay.
Such
Sorry?
From StatsCan.
Okay, Statistics Canada. He's talking about some little bit different than what George and Jim said, which is talking about external data. Yes, sir?
Customer transactions.
Okay, customer transactions. I will take it as order data. Okay, so when we talk about 4 people, let's take a sample of these 4 types of data which you have got. Majority of the data which we are talking about is the first party data. What is common between what Jim said, what George said, and what's your name, sir? Sorry? Gilmore? Okay. They all said is about the first party data. This is the data that is created internally by the company. It could be orders, it could be purchase orders, it could be invoices, remittance advisors, so on and so forth. This is the data which the company creates to run the business. And ultimately, all this data, whether directly or indirectly, goes and hits the general ledger. It is the data that's created internally. But rarely, we are talking about other types of data. Oh my gosh, what are you talking about? What are the other types of data we are talking about? First one is the zero party data. A few days back, I was in Facebook and I follow Calgary Petroleum Club. I saw a post from Calgary Petroleum Club, blah, 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 something. I put a comment in there, are you open for taking new members? Within half an hour, I get a phone call from Calgary Petroleum Club. I see that you have asked for this question, we are taking new members, would you be interested to meet? I was traveling at that time, I said that no, I'll come after 2 weeks to meet you guys. So they validated my phone number, they took my more details about me and all those things. Am I a customer of Calgary Petroleum Club? No. Why did they collect all the data about me? Because I could be a potential customer, I am a prospect. This is the data which Calgary Petroleum Club uses to get potential customer, and this is called as the zero party data, which is all the data the company has about the individual or entity, whoever you call it, where they don't have any transactions, where none of the transactions are hitting the GM. Marketing teams, for example, they are working on so much of data on zero party data. Today, Matt is going away with so much of zero party data here. It's all about prospects here, because at some point in time, he thinks that you all will be Snowflake customers. Insurance companies, banks, retail companies have got so much of zero party data, hoping that at some point in time, you will become their customers. The second one is the first party data, which all of you have mentioned, which is the most common data which we talk about. The third one is the second party data. What is that second party data? Let's take an example of Suncor Energy. Suncor Energy is building a refinery, and to build that refinery, they give a contract to Schlumberger, Jacobs, Floor Engineering, all the EPC companies. So these companies which are working for Suncor are working on Suncor related projects, which indirectly is Suncor's data. So they are building the refinery, which is indirectly for Suncor. So this data which these companies have is actually your data, which is called as the second party data. For example, you want a mortgage and you go to a mortgage broker, he looks at all the banks and gives you the best deal. And all the data which this mortgage broker has is the second party data for the mortgage company, for the banks, for instance. So a lot of data which the companies are working on is second party data, which is actually your data, which you guys are not worried about or concerned about, but somebody else is working on it. And the last one is the third party data, which is what David is talking about, data from Statistics Canada. I am Parkland Fuels, I am a retail chain, I want to get the data about all the weather and economic data of Canada, I get it, but at the same time, my competitors can also get the same data. So this is a third party data which has got no competitive advantage per se, you can go and buy it as a data product. So overall, when we talk about different types of data, sadly, many companies are focusing just on the first party data and completely ignoring zero party data, second party data, and third party data. So one food for thought after this call is think about the second party data which you have. Your data, which is somebody else is managing it, which requires a lot of data integration capabilities to bring it back to your data landscape so that you can derive more insights and get more value out of your data. So most of the companies, when we talk about data quality, they're focused on this, completely ignorant about the other three types of data. Each one has got its own challenges, own pros and cons, but your job as a data leader is to look at the whole data landscape and manage your data. Okay, so when we talk about data quality, Data is, what's the definition of data quality? Can anybody define what data quality means? How do you define data quality?
It reliably tells you what you want to know.
What you want to know? Okay, no, that's one thing. Any other definition?
Machine readable.
Readable, okay. Readable. Anything else? Little bit.
Reliable.
Data is reliable.
Consistent.
Consistent. Okay, we are getting into the dimensions of data.
Accurate.
Accurate. Good. Yes, sir. Meets standards. Okay.
It can be modeled.
It can be modeled. So many definitions of data quality which we got. So that's one of the challenges which we have. So what I did was elevated the discussion tied to the purpose. Why do we need data, good data quality for the business? Why do businesses need data quality? Businesses need data and of course good data quality for three main reasons. Number one, to run their operations. Number two, for compliance. And then number three, for decision making. These are the three main reasons why companies need data. For instance, let's take a company like Suncor, which is issuing thousands of purchase orders every month. Why are they issuing purchase orders? Mainly they are issuing purchase orders for two main reasons. One is to run their business so that I get to know how many is ordered, when will I get, so on and so forth. And next, number two, for compliance reasons. If something goes wrong between Suncor Energy and the vendor, they have a reliable compliance document in a purchase order to go and refer and settle the dispute. But let's say over a period of time, every month 1,000 purchase orders have been issued, in a year 10,000 purchase orders are there. George looks at all those 10,000 purchase orders and says, oh my gosh, I see a pattern here. The more quantity I order, the unit price is actually decreasing. So this is the insight which he is getting and say, hey guys, now we don't need to have purchase orders for 25 different vendors. Let's rationalize that and have just 10 vendors. So he's going to make a decision based on the insights which he is going to derive. So he didn't start with the creating the purchase order with the objective of creating the insights. He started creating purchase order with the objective of running the business and for compliance reasons. And when the data reaches a critical mass, he was able to derive the insights and make the right decision. So overall, data has got three main reasons, which is operations, compliance, and decision making or analytics. And it's typically the operations and compliance which is driving analytics. Rarely analytics drives operations and compliance. Rarely people will say, hey, let's capture data because I want to derive insights. It's the other way around. The business is running, they have a compliance reason because regulators want it, and after that analytics is typically the byproduct of operations and compliance. So with this we heard a lot of terms about reliability, accuracy, timeliness, and so on and so forth. So in my book, which is here, I talked about 12 key data quality dimensions. In the interest of time, I'll not go over all of them, but I'll talk about two things which are here in green color: accuracy and correctness. So I was working as a consultant for Canada's biggest telecom company, and as a contractor, as an independent consultant, and the company directly hired me. So when the company directly hires an individual like me, I'm typically part of that internal team. And then we had a big four consulting company which was doing the implementation as well. So it was a project on Customer 360. So they came to the management and said, hey, the customer master is really messed up. We have 99% of the customer masters which are very bad quality. Oh my gosh, we are a $15 billion company and we have been running business for decades. How come 99% of the customer masters are messed up? I said, what do you mean by data quality is bad? Can you elaborate this? The address is wrong. So what? The address is wrong, you are not able to send the invoices to those people. But how many of you are getting paper invoices for your telephone bill? And how many of you are getting email invoices? Most of us today are getting email invoices. Hardly we get a paper receipt on the invoice, on the bill. So we looked at the data and we said that 98% of the customers have signed up for email invoices. So what you are saying as address being wrong doesn't make sense because people move. So hardly people, when they move, they go back and update their customer profile and so on. So let's look at those people who have signed up for paper invoices or paper bills and see whether the address is really wrong. So the discussion immediately came down from 99% bad data to 1% bad data by asking the right questions. But even 1% for such a big company is bad. So let's look at what it does. So we looked at the 1% of the data and we look at the address. If it is street, it was abbreviated as ST. If it was court, it was abbreviated as CT. If it was boulevard, it was abbreviated as BLBD, so on and so forth. Technically, these are incorrect, but these are not a big deal for a postman. He knows the street is called ST, court is called CT, and so on and so forth. But only thing that matters is the postal code, the zip code. He said, let's look at the zip code and look at and compare it with a different API and see what really is the issue. And when we looked at the number, it came to just 0.004%. So the discussion in a matter of 30 minutes came down from 99% bad data to 0.004% bad data. How does it matter? First thing is, it's about asking the right questions. Next, number two, it's about knowing the data quality dimension. Telephone number needs to be correct. Addresses need to be accurate. Telephone number is Boolean. Even a 1 digit missing in the telephone number makes the data invalid. Whereas an address, whether you call it a CT or code, is not a big deal. It has to be accurate. So you need to look at the right attributes or the right dimensions and distinguish whether the attribute has to be correct or attribute has to be accurate. So these are the 12 key dimensions I have listed in the book, so that you know that when you are looking at data quality, you are asking the right question and having the right definitions to manage them. So 3 purposes of data, which we said: operations, compliance, and analytics. So there is a line between those two, which is basically the segregation of this, or the characteristics of the one on the left side versus the right. What is one on the left side? These are defined and predictable. Purchase order. I know that this purchase order number has to be 8 characters. It needs to have 25 fields where I need to populate, or else I'll not be able to save, so on and so forth. Data is often in the native or proprietary format. We use purchase orders mainly for standard ERP systems like SAP or Oracle NetSuite or JD Edwards, and so on and so forth. So data is often native in the proprietary format, and the focus of operations and compliance is on business process. Whereas if you look at insights, it's all hypothesis based. The more questions I have, the more data I'm going to get, or more data I'm going to need. The data might be there, data might not be there. The data is always needed in a structured format when you need to talk about analytics. Regression, for example. Let's talk about linear regression. When you talk about linear regression, the data type for all the independent and the dependent variables have to be continuous or numeric in nature. If I'm not able to get this data, then there's no way I can run regression models. It has to be in a defined format, in a structured format, and the focus is on insights. I'm going to derive insights from analytics. So let me ask you a question, for instance, or I'll tell you a story. So this was for a retail company. The first question they had is sales dependent on order type? Can I get the data from my systems or not? Yes or no? I have a question which says, or hypothesis which says, sales is dependent on order or product type or product ID. Can I get this data? Can I get this information from my IT system? Yes or no? Yes. Good. Because when you go to Superstore or when you go to Costco, for example, every product you buy has an ID. Whether David has bought bananas or whether Lex has bought apples, I can go and figure out what has been purchased, so on and so forth. Sales is dependent on the product ID you can get. My next question, is sales dependent on location? Is Calgary, am I selling more apples in Calgary compared to Edmonton? Can I get this? Can I get an answer to this question from my transaction system? Yes, you can get. If you look at the store ID, I can put the location and I find out how many apples are sold in Calgary and how many apples are sold in Edmonton. I can get this information because it's all about operations and compliance. Now my third question, is my sales dependent on weather? Is it a valid question? Okay, so valid question. Can I get this data from my transaction system? Do I capture weather data from in my transaction system? No. So when you talk, so what would happen? You would say, I don't have the weather data, so you're not able to derive insights. So you come to the conclusion that data quality is bad. But from an operations and compliance perspective, which we discussed earlier, that's where the origination of data typically is. The data quality is perfect. Just because you had a powerful question here, you are not able to derive those insights here. So that's why the 4 types of data are really important. So when you say the weather data is an important factor in my sales, I don't have the weather data. So what do? You go and buy it. There are many companies which are selling weather data. So you buy the weather data and you integrate it with your transaction system so that you know that on this day it was sunny, on this day it was rainy, and so on and so forth. So we did a similar project for a company which is into car wash. So we said that, okay, you had a loyalty card, and if the hypothesis was that if it snows today and tomorrow it's going to be sunny, will people come for car wash? Yes or no? The chance is high. There's a good hype. So what we are going to do is to increase the number more. We are going to send a coupon to their phones saying that tomorrow is going to be a sunny day. Here, take this $1 coupon and use it so that the car wash is, you get a better rate for car wash. So we use the weather data on the transaction system, and we started sending these notifications to those people, and we are able to create more sales. So just to give you an idea about how data can be used to improve the revenue as well. Provided you know what are the different types of data, not restrict yourself to just the first party data, but be open. Look at other types of data which is there in the company, which includes zero party data, second party, which is often ignored, and lastly the third party data. Okay, so what's data analytics? It's about deriving insights to proactively measure something to improve performance and decision making. So why do we need data analytics? The fundamental thing which we need for data analytics is to measure something. If you don't believe in the concept of measurement and using those measurements to derive insights, you are not going very far with data analytics. When I go to my clients and they say that, hey Prashanth, we love data analytics, but the biggest problem we have in our company is the culture of data analytics is not there. So I said, what do you mean by culture? Nobody is able to define the data culture very clearly. My definition of data culture is about measurement. If you don't believe in the concept of measurement, stop your analytics projects right now. It's a waste of time. It's more frustrating in a way when you have those, when you derive those insights and nobody is able to use it. So the fundamental thing that is required for data analytics is about culture, and that culture is about measurement. Let me give you a very simple example which we all can relate. Say today, you believe in good health. So you go to the lab and say, hey, take this blood test and give me my health report. And you get a health report, and unfortunately the cholesterol levels are a little bit off. So you have 2 options, either to throw that report, which is an insight. You got an insight, right? The cholesterol levels is off. Or else you say, I believe in the concept of measurement and improving my health, improving my performance, so I'm going to take this report and I'm going to exercise well, stop eating junk food or reduce my junk food, do sleep well, and all those things. But if you don't believe in that concept of improving your health, there is no point in taking those health report and looking at it, right? So the first thing that is required is belief in that measurement. That measurement is the key to improve your business performance. If you're not believing in this, there's no point in doing R, Python, data quality, attending this conference and all those things. The fundamental thing of analytics is the belief of measurement. And once you believe in measurement, you can use those insights to improve your performance. So I wrote a couple of articles on this, including what data oil and gas industry should do to adopt analytics, including 2 things they should do and 2 things they should stop doing, which I've written. If you're interested, you can read this article. And data culture, which I wrote in Forbes as well. What is this data culture and how do you build the concept of measurement? So why data quality goes down? So they say, if you don't do anything in your company, the rate of data quality degradation in an organization is between 2 to 7%. So the rate of data quality degradation is very high. Manual errors. Just because people are not trained well on how to manage data, how to use data, so on and so forth, they say manual errors are almost like 73% of the causes in why data quality degrades is because of manual errors, because people are not trained well and so on and so forth. Organization silos. So we always have different silos in the organization. Let's take a classic case where we have conflicting requirements because of organization silos. Inventory management, where Jim worked for a long time. Marketing and finance, talking about inventory management. Does marketing prefer more inventory or less inventory of their products? More. They prefer more inventory so that when the customer is asking for it, they can sell. And if you keep more inventory, what happens? The inventory carrying cost goes up. And what does the finance say? No, we can't keep more inventory, reduce inventory. So there is always a conflict that's happening between marketing and finance when it comes to inventory management. One wants more, one wants less. Because that's because of organization silos, and that in turn translates to poor data quality issues. Let's take procurement and finance. Payment terms. Net 60 versus net 30. Who loves net 30 and who loves net 60? Does finance love net 30 or net 60? Finance loves net 60 because you can increase the cash conversion cycle, they have more money. And procurement loves net 30 because they can satisfy the vendors will be happy because they are paid sooner, and so on and so forth. So the same data object, net 30, one is happy, one is disappointed. So if you look at the organization silos, they have different perspectives of looking at the data. Different ways of interpretation and consumption, which I discussed here. Data integration. Almost like 80% of the work in data analytics is about data integration. So you have, when I was in GE, I worked in GE a long time back. Just for procurement alone, we had 17 different systems to run your business. And procurement generally is considered a standard business process. So to run procurement, we had 17 different systems, and to integrate all the data coming from SAP, from JD Edwards, from NetSuite, and even Excel spreadsheets, and give one procure to pay report was almost taking days and weeks. So data integration takes almost like 70 to 80% of the work in analytics is data integration. David, is it a fair number? Yeah. So system upgrades. Whenever systems are upgraded, there is a lot of issues. In one company where I worked, they use the tax code or they use the telephone number of the vendor to derive the tax code. So if it was 587, they said this number is Alberta. There is no provincial tax. If it is not 587, so there is you pay the provincial tax. So what happens when there is upgrade that is happening? All the logic which you have built is pretty much gone if you are in a different namespace. So system upgrades matter a lot, and poor database design, especially in bespoke application. Very few companies are still using the standard enterprise application. A lot of custom applications are there in almost every company, and one of the risks of having this is about poor database design in the custom application. So in my book, I listed 16 reasons why data quality degrades. So in interest of time, I picked 6 of them. One is if you look at the data lifecycle, I've broken down into 4 stages: origination, integration, data science, and decision science. From the origination perspective, probably, especially in operations and compliance, it is improved. But when it comes to analytics, because analytics requires data from different, integration is kind of integral to analytics. Without data integration, analytics or data science is kind of incomplete. So when we talk about analytics, from there I think it's a big issue. Why? Because when you look at the data that has been captured, in my experience, almost like 80 to 90% of the data is unstructured data, which I call it as TAVI data, which is text, audio, video, and images. The good thing about unstructured data is quick digitization or origination. You can originate the data very quickly. That's why the ECM systems like SharePoint or FileNet, they have tons of data. But the bad thing about that is lack of structure. How many of you in your companies, for example, document management system, documents have been uploaded left, right, and center, but very few insights have been derived from those documents, for example, including images and text and all those things. So overall, to what Prabhu said, on the origination part of it, yes, the data quality might be improving, but which is mainly centered on operations and compliance. But whenever there's analytics, integration is an integral part of it. And we talk about integration, there is a lot of structuring of the data that is required, bringing data from different models and bringing it all together. So that's still an issue. Yeah. So overall, in my experience, whenever data moves, there is a risk for data quality. Yeah. So that's why most of the companies, like I work for Procter & Gamble time back, and there was so much of push to manage all the procurement activities in SAP, because they want one data model so that they can do all this three-way match, procure to pay analytics and everything. So that requires leadership as well. I consulted for Shell as well, and Shell was also pretty much like this. Standard business processes in SAP. Yeah, it's not that they love SAP, but they went with the system of record as SAP. So let's look at the 3 top data quality myths. So the first one is, first myth, data is a business asset. Oh my gosh, what are you talking, Prashanth? We have been hearing this data is oil, blood, oxygen and everything, and you say that's a myth. We'll talk about that. 100% data quality is required for analytics. Oh my gosh, again, one more. And last one, data is valuable all the time. So we'll talk about one by one. Data is I wrote a couple of blogs related to this, real-time analytics, what I mean for one of my clients, and see why is data missing from the balance sheet. You can read this later. Okay, the first one is, data is a business asset. True, data is a business asset only if it is managed well. If not, it becomes a liability. And I've told my clients, treat data as a liability first. Don't jump into the conclusion that data is an asset. Start from the left side, be a little bit paranoid and look at data as a liability, and then you can transform the data into an asset. What do you mean, Prashanth? How can data be a liability? 4 reasons. The first one is volume. More data that has been captured, there is going to be more complexity, more cost. Somebody mentioned about complexity as well earlier. So today, when we talk about the cost of IT management, in almost every company, the IT budget is going up by 5% every year. But there's a lot of efforts that's been done on reducing cost as well. Cloud computing, outsourcing, agile development, that thing, this thing, everything. But still, they're not able to tame the cost of IT management. And why is that? Because the cost of data, the data footprint is increasing, and that results not only in cost, but also in complexity. We talk about ESG. What does ESG stand for? Yes, sir?
Environmental, social, governance.
Yeah, environmental, social, and governance. So today, if you look at in 2017 or something, most of the oil companies didn't have even a web page on ESG. Today, almost everybody has a web page on ESG. And why is that? Because most of the investment that's happening today, including the investments that are happening in the oil patch, is tied to your carbon footprint. So that's why Synovus Energy, Suncor, everybody is talking about ESG these days, not just about what this gentleman is talking about, the healthcare or the retail. Everybody is talking about ESG. And even Google is talking about ESG. Why? Because one of the biggest polluters in the world today, is going to be, or in the next few years, is going to be data centers. I'm assuming that the way things are today. So they say that the data centers today, or before COVID, it was just about less than 1% of the carbon footprint was by data centers. They say by 2025 it's going to be 4%, and by 2030 it's going to be almost like 10%. So imagine data centers becoming one of the biggest polluters, just like industrialization or other transportation and so on and so forth. So the more data you are capturing, the more carbon footprint you are incurring. So I did a study on 2 companies here in Calgary, both oil patch, one which starts with S, another one which starts with C, and I found that the rate of so the data footprint is almost going to be 1/3 of the total carbon footprint, including the production, how much oil is produced by 2030, assuming things are going to remain the same. So that's the rate at which things are happening on the. So don't think that moving to the cloud is cheap. There is always a cost that is associated with moving to the cloud, including the cost of data footprint. Data security, the more data you capture, there is going to be more risk. For example, Equifax, when the hackers went and hacked Equifax systems, Equifax spent $1.4 billion in fixing their IT systems. And the hackers, they don't come to mom and pop shops. They go to big companies which have got tons and tons of data. And when they go to those companies, they don't care whether it's dark data or bright data. They go and access every data they have. And once they access it, you have to go and fix the systems or fix all those things. So that means the more data you have, you become more attractive to the hackers. And lastly, privacy. The more data you have to manage the privacy aspects. Cambridge Analytica came into limelight because of data and analytics. And it was the same data and analytics which resulted in their collapse. So data is definitely an asset if you know how to use it. Just storing and keeping data in your company doesn't make you data driven. you need to know what to do with that data. So if you don't know how to do with that data, it becomes a liability. If 80 to 90% of the data you have in your company is unstructured data, which you don't use it, then you will incur more cost, you increase carbon footprint, risk, and even your brand and legal issues as well. Okay, good. So what do you do? What do you do in this situation? How do you transform the data into an asset? Three things. First thing is tie the data to the purpose. What are the three purposes why data is required in a company? Can somebody remind the room? Operations and decision making. Don't capture data because somebody said data is oil or data is oxygen, and you went to a conference and somebody talked about cool things. Capture data because you need it, and you need the data for these three main reasons. Either directly or indirectly, you should be able to associate with operations, compliance, and decision making. Next, number two, data should be processed. As I said earlier, almost like 80 to 90% of the data which we capture is the TAVI data, text, audio, video, and images. The good thing about unstructured data is quick digitization. You can capture the digital image of those record. But the bad thing about that data is that it is practically useless for analytics. For example, regression, if I want to run linear regression, for example, all the data type has to be numeric in nature so that I know what's the independent as well as the dependent variable. So unless I am able to process the data and bring it to the right model, the data in an unstructured format is practically useless. So increase the adoption of the data by not considering only operations and compliance, but also looking at the third aspect, which is analytics as well. And for analytics, you need to process the data. And the third one is data has to be non-substitutable, especially for analytics. If the data literacy in the company is very low, people tend to rely on the tribal knowledge to make decisions. If the literacy in the company is high, people want to use data to supplement their intuition with data as well. So you improve the literacy in the company so that data can be a real business asset. So it's about three things which you need to do to transform the data from being a liability into an asset. So many people said about why data quality degrades, including the 16 reasons. But the root cause of all the poor data quality reasons we have is because of data literacy. People are not educated about what to do with the data, whether it's about manual errors, whether it's about data silos, and everything can be attributed to the root cause being lack of poor data literacy skills. So reality two, 100% data quality is required for analytics. So I was talking to a prospect, and they said, Prashanth, we need your help in having 100% data quality. I said it doesn't exist. So what are you talking? Your competitor, which is a big four, just gave us a proposal. They said they're going to give 100% data quality. I said it doesn't exist. Why? Because the business is always changing. The business is always in a state of flux. Mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, new product introductions, regulations, all those things is in a constant change the business is undergoing. How do you expect data to be in a perfect state, given that data is always a recording of the past event? Many companies are using the word real-time analytics. I hate that word. I say that doesn't exist. The better word would be near real-time. The real-time, because the data is always a recording of the past. If there is a lag, which could be seconds, it could be months, it could be years, and so on and so forth. But the word real-time actually doesn't exist when it comes to analytics. I was working for a utilities company. The VP used to say, Prashanth, we run our business every day, but I get my reports every quarter. So that's on the real-time analytics. So in data analytics as well, they say perfection is an enemy of progress. 100% data quality actually doesn't exist. So what? Where do we go? Should we manage with 20%? Is it good? Or should we go with 99%? They say use a 40-70 rule. What is that 40-70 rule? So don't make any decision if you have less than 40% data, and don't wait for a situation where you have more than 70% data. And this is, today we are not talking about big data, we are talking about right data. We are talking about small data. We are talking about not quantity and we are talking about quality. So a lot of articles written by Inc., Andrew Ng, who is considered as the father of AI, and all those people. Everybody is talking about the same thing. It's not quantity, it's about quality. So there is no state called perfect state, which is good enough is good. And 75-80% if the data is of good quality is good, and you can support it with other types of data, including second party, third party, so on and so forth. So third one is data is valuable all the time. The reality is it depends on the data type and it depends on the data lifecycle stage. If you look at the data from an integration perspective, we can talk about three major types of data. Reference data is all about categories, like your unit of measure, like plants, sales officers, and everything, where you can categorize the business. Master data is about entities, like your vendors, your products, your customers. And transactional data is all about events, such as your orders, your invoices, remittance advisors, which is a function of time. But if you look at the data, for instance, the most valuable from analytics perspective is about transaction. It's about a function of time. So I was talking to a transportation company, and they said, Prashanth, we need your help in improving the customer 360. Okay, how many customers do you have? We have 5 million. Oh, that's a huge number to clean the data and do all those things. So tell me, in the last 18 months, how many of those 5 million customers, 5 million, how many of these 5 million customers did you do business with? Any idea? Throw a number. So you must be having a lot of master data in your companies, like on equipment, on vendors and everything. Sorry? It's much lower than 1,700. 5 million customers in their database, but they're doing business with just 1,700 of them. I said, okay, let's talk about 5 years. The last 5 years, these all coming from the half-life of data. So that's what I said, 1 year, 18 months, and all those things. The last 5 years, how many customers do you do business with? 4,000. So most of the companies have huge amounts of masters, but what really matters is the transactional data. So transactional data is like the acid test. It's where the real value of your analytics is. If somebody comes and says, clean my master data, where do you start with? Go back to transactional data, find out how many transactions you did for the last 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years, and then come back, take that as a first cut, and do your data cleansing. It depends on the type, and it depends on the data life cycle where you are there. So I just put a typical example of how a typical IT system works on. So how do you do this? For operations and compliance, use the system of record or the first party data to improve the first party data in the system of record. For analytics, focus on the system of insights with zero party data, second party, and the third party. So that's where you can improve your value of data. Data profiling is you take the data and see, it's like a report which says what the level of data quality is. Just like when you go to your when you get your health report, they say, oh, your blood pressure is 120/80, which is good. Your cholesterol level is this, it's all good. Your sugar levels are off, and all those things. So you get all those numbers, and you basically they are profiling you and giving you a report, basically a data quality report. Okay, so how do you realize the data quality? So this is a framework which I have been using in many places. The book is also based on this. Define the data quality problem, assess where you are, realize or improve the situation, and sustain it. The first one is data quality, which I call it as 1-10-100 rule. So many people say, why should we improve data quality? What's the wrong in just keeping where things are? So I use this 1-10-100 rule, which says that if you are proactive and preventing the issue, you just spend 1 times the cost, or if it is fixed internally in the company, you spend 10 times the cost, or if you fix it once the issue reaches the customer, you spend 100 times the cost. So most of the data quality things are kind of visible, but there are many things which are not visible. That's what the profiling actually helps. Use the 1-10-100 rule to see what's where the data quality actually exists. So analyze phase, this is where I mentioned to David about the data profiling measures, measure of centrality and variation, where you can use at different levels to say if it is between this, you call it as ideal state, then the threshold, then there's a chaos, and ultimately it's a real mess in the company. And this is where which data you should track to optimize your business performance. That's why I say my preference is always transactions. Start with the transactions, and that's where it gives you a guidance about what you can do to improve your data quality. Third one is to realize. So you have MDM, which is master data management. Many of my clients, when I talk about data quality, they think it's MDM. I say MDM is one of the options which you have to improve data quality. It doesn't have to be always jumping into MDM. MDM is great for operations and compliance, but for analytics, you need to be agile. You need to be flexible. Look at other data sources also and make it happen. So MDM is one way to improve data quality. Data integration. Many ways to improve data integration. Feature engineering, which is to use a little bit of your common sense or leadership skills on the existing data and create new attributes, is also a great way. I put it as part of data integration as well. Cleansing, and lastly semantic layer. If you're talking about purely on analytics and you want to do analytics, it's better straight to jump into the semantic layer and not spend too much time on the operations and compliance aspect and derive those insights. So there's a lot of resources. There is no shortage of tools, the shortage of skills. It all depends on how you use it. If you don't know how to use it, it will be just like this picture. And lastly, sustain, which is about governance. So there's a joke which they say about data governance. They say data governance is like wishing to have a six-pack body. Everybody wants it, but very few people are willing to invest their time and time on getting that body. So everybody wants data governance, but it's very difficult to achieve. So it doesn't have to be big. Every company is different. You have to tailor it to your organization. It depends on your data and insight strategy. Some companies are focused more on commodities and markets, like the oil industry, for example, whereas some companies are focused more on products and customers, like the retail industry. So you have to decide what you are focusing on, what industry you are in. And lastly, data governance, focus on data. It's not about policing. In data governance, the focus is on data. So in the CDO magazine, I wrote an article on 3 elements for effective data governance. If you're interested, you can read this as well. Treat data as a data flywheel. Don't restrict to just the first party data, because the more data you have, the more better the business is going to be. And what is that more data? Not just your first party data, but also second parties, zero party, second party, and third party data. Data quality is highly contextual. It depends on the time, it depends on location, it depends on whom you're talking to. For example, a simple KPI. The KPI for a CFO is very different from a KPI for an analyst. A CFO looks at the most aggregate level of information, whereas an analyst looks at the most granular part of the information. So everybody is talking about data quality and KPIs, but the level of granularity is very different. Data is an asset only if you know how to manage it well. If not, it's a liability. Transactional data is the one where you manage your data quality, and all data management is change management. It's process, data, systems, and people. So it's not about technology, it's about people and process as well.